Hello, everybody. This is Professor Hamamoto. It is August 12, year 2021, 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I would like to welcome to the live stream Ayape, Melissa Kielverter. I see you're a licensed clinical social worker. Interesting. Good. Welcome. Infidel Apostate, Kathy Sue, as usual, hanging in there. Chopping it up. Yes, indeed. Don Lavelle and let's see here. Devo, and Tyrone Sargent. There you go. And Going to Cry 96 Tears, like Question Mark and the Mysterians, one of my favorite groups. And we're going to talk about another one of my favorites. That would be Devo. Yes. And Rita Phillips, Samantha Smith, Piper Fogel. Welcome, 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 Corky Goss. Soga Nostra Nostra, yes, indeed. Swan Song 777. Well, I don't want to take up the whole show here with the shout outs because I got a lot of material, including some really, really good videos. I found this one about, it's an interview, which I'll get to in a moment. I don't know how far we're going to be able to get through it, but I put it in there just in case we have time enough. But even if we just see a little bit of this particular first-person eyewitness account, I think it's going to go a long way. So today we're going to talk about the post-human aesthetic, as I call it, of this group Devo. And they come out of Akron, Ohio, right? One of my favorite states in the Union, Ohio. Yes, all the way. And Devo, the group, and I'm not going to go into who they are. Most of you know already. And if you don't, there's tons of information out there for you to catch up on that. But they were formed in the immediate aftermath of the infamous Kent State University massacre that took place on May 4th, 1970. Now, many years later, this happened in, when was it? November 11th, was it? Gosh, I think November 11th, it was, November 18. Yes, it was right before Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving weekend was coming. It was a Friday. And there were student demonstrators. They had been camped out there the whole, I think, at least the fall quarter, maybe even from the summer, left over from the previous spring quarter. This is at UC Davis, where I used to teach. And this is November 18th, 2011. And I just felt something was going to go down on Friday. And typically there are no professors, just staff and students are there. And even then, a lot of students have already vacated, except there was a big demo going on there. And I just had a sense that I needed to be there. So I was there. And sure enough, most of you have heard about or read about, or might even know people who were involved in the gassing. I certainly did. I had students who were involved, who were victimized by it, as well as being there. And I bore witness to it. I have the videos, showed it. And at that moment, Kent State, the massacre at Kent State came right back to me, because I'm right of that era. I was about a year or two behind the guys in Devo, maybe 2 or 3 years younger. I was in high school when the Kent State massacre happened. I was going to go to college the very following year, and I was going to, join the adult world and become involved in this new cultural transformation that was taking place in American society, and political transformation. And I was quite optimistic about contributing to this evolution, not devolution or de-evolution, but evolution to a higher plane. And of course, the founding members of Devo, after having witnessed, or at least experienced, their home campus being invaded by the so-called National Guard, and having fellow students and staff members being fired on, and having 4 of their fellow students being murdered with a hail of bullets. It's something like 70 plus rounds of ammunition fired off in less than 20 seconds. So at that point, as you're going to see from an interview of one of the founding members, he said he stopped being a hippie, a peace and love hippie, and he decided to get really straight with what the world's about. And that's really the topic of this talk here. It's about Devo, yes, it's about Kent State, but it's really about what's going down here in 2021 and the historical precedents. And it's also beyond that, a deeper, I'm going to share with you a deeper understanding of how I view our situation today, right? And I'm not going to get into the specifics about, factor 1, factor 2, factor 3, or beta, gamma, whatever it is that they're trying to put in on us. There are plenty of people out there who are discussing that, but I think it's important for me to share my political perspective. And I'll just get to it right now. I just don't think the way the situation is today, that we're going to be able to find any relief from the U.S. Congress, from the state legislators, or the governors of the states. There's some exceptions that even they have constraints placed upon them, and we're certainly not going to get any relief or redress or solutions coming at the level of Congress, and we're not going to get relief from the U.S. Supreme Court. We're not going to get any relief from there's going to be a few victories here and there. So when I say never, that's, put that in quotation marks. And we're not going to get much relief from the state courts as well. I think if anything is going to take place, it's going to happen locally. All history is local, and I'm going to talk about that on Thursday for the Thursday trio. And we're not going to get it from the city councils. We're not going to get it from the school boards. On it, you get the idea. The change is going to come from us. And I want to minimize any sort of violence that will result if this form of political oppression continues as it is. And it's not going to end well, because historically we've seen, not just in the U.S., but all around the world and for centuries now, the so-called civilians, which is what they like to label us, there's civilians and then there's the armed forces, right? They like to create that division and exacerbate it. They're really on our side. And this is what General Milley and all these people at the Pentagon and NATO are going to find out, that they're not even going to be able to rely on their own men and women. And I think that's one of the reasons why the Pentagon and the DOD is backing off of this mandatory blanket edict concerning the troops. They're afraid of getting fragged. And going back to the Vietnam era, and I have a really great book on it, there was a phenomenon. There were rank and file troops who were under the command of these lieutenants who were, came out of ROTC. They're, 30-day wonders who fly, in country to Vietnam, and they're telling all their battle-hardened troops to do all kinds of crazy activities, and they say, no, we're not going to have it. And some of them were court-martialed, some of them were sent into jail or given hard duty. But what happened is that there was a phenomenon called, I wasn't even going to talk about this. I wanted to talk about Devo, but it's on my mind, so I'll just share it with you. But there's a phenomenon that happened, and this is not unique to warfare, but the rank and file, the draftees, and I was a draftee of the Vietnam War, but I didn't go because the war ended just in the nick of time. Otherwise, I might not be here with you today. But the draftees, and these are a lot of students too, who lost their student deferments, and this is why there is a lot of protests taking place in universities such as Kent State, right? And this is going on all over the country, and this is important information for you and me to understand. This is why the universities were locked down ideologically in GLBTQ studies and now critical race studies, in order to divert energy, intellectual energy and attention, and also to provide subsidies to these sellout so-called pseudo-leftist, pseudo-progressive professors and administrators, so that the universities will be ideologically locked down and there will be no resistance to what's going down. at the level of the undergraduates or even the graduate students. And it's and the professors, of course, quite short-sighted, because all of you are going to go down by and by. It's not going to take very long either, so you're not protected. But anyway, this phenomenon of the executors of these draconian policies will start to manifest itself, I'm afraid. Many of us warned against this, but the troops turned against the officers, and they threw fragmentation grenades in their cubby holes, in their offices or under their bunks, and many of them were willing to go to prison for it. And the higher level people at the Pentagon, were quite dismayed by these reports. Now, whether that hastened the departure of the American military from Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos is subject to discussion, but the phenomenon happened. I'm just reporting it to you here. I'm just reminding you what went on. And I was reading about it because I'm a product of that generation that went through the John F. Kennedy assassination, the assassination of Martin Luther King, the assassination of Bobby Kennedy, the assassination of Malcolm X, and through the whole Vietnam War, where 3 million Vietnamese, Cambodian, Laotian civilians were killed, were murdered, right? So I'm a product of this. And then I started seeing it again happening at UC Davis. And when then Chancellor Linda Katehi put the order out there, and I have all the names of the people who were at the meeting, all the faculty member, I have your names. I have all the people who were there at the meeting who gave the okay, the green light to bring in these mercenaries from off campus to spray the students down. And gosh, it's just so fortunate it did not end in gunplay. And that's when I say gunplay, for a lot of these people, they might have been in some sort of live action role play situation. But this is for real, ladies and gentlemen. This is more real, more grammatically, more real than anything that you're seeing reported out there, even in so-called independent media. So, by the way, I have a new microphone. Thank you very much to my Patreon supporters. I know some of you wanted this red one, but I had to retire it because this little USB input here went janky and it's not worth repairing. So I got an Audio Technica 2020 USB. I can recommend it. It's working very well for me. And I do not recommend a Blue Yeti. The input is inadequate. It's for amateurs, and I'm going to keep upgrading my audio and my video equipment as I move on, because I'm building out this channel, and I have greater ambitions that far exceeds, talk about janky, that far exceeds YouTube or these other repressive technologies. There's some positive aspects of it, but you know the critique, right? You know about censorship. And by the way, just as a promotion, I want you to know that I'm beginning to use this new microphone to do audio bits. They run from 10, 15, 20 minutes. I'm going to try to keep it short. And you're not going to see my face. You're just going to hear the audio, good quality audio. And I'm going to be doing some readings of books and journal articles that are of interest to you, because what I'm seeing on YouTube, even amongst people on our side, is just a lot of repetition, a lot of echo chamber, a lot of blah, 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 woof, woof, as Jimi Hendrix would say. And it's becoming as bad as mainstream media. Oh yeah, the Tavistock. Oh yeah, MK Ultra. Oh yeah, my gosh. So we have to move forward. It doesn't really satisfy me. I've already done my homework. I've been doing this for years now. And congratulations if you first, you just now discovered the moon. Congratulations, but don't put any of that stuff in my comments, because I've been there and done that. So listen to these audios, and I think you'll benefit by them. And they are inspired by the conversations I have with my friends and colleagues, John O'Loughlin and George Webb. We have a wide-ranging discussion. We're going to have one in an hour after this show here. There's an hour break, and then we're going to resume there as a trio And but I think about what they tell me. They're both thoughtful, as you know, thoughtful individuals and deep thinkers and communicators. So what they tell me or what goes by sticks with me. So I'm inspired by our conversations, and that's why I'm doing these audios, because I want to dig a little bit deeper, and I want to express myself in a longer format that I wasn't able to do in the trio. So this is a little bit of a side project here to complement this larger effort. So yeah, please join us today. And I mentioned at the outset, all history is local. And just as a preview to those of you here in the live chat, I'm going to ask George about the pride of Akron, Ohio, Devo, right? And I'm going to ask John about Devo as well, because we're about the same age and we were treated to the same popular culture of all over the country, right? So that's going to be an interesting discussion, and hopefully we can use that as a avenue to traverse when we're talking about the current de-evolved politics that we are now experiencing. Okay, let's get on with the talk here. Kent State University, located in Northeast Ohio. It's near Akron. I've never been to Akron, never been to Kent State. I hope to get there someday. Maybe when I go visit Toledo, I'll get a chance to do that. I love it up there, man. It's so great. It's beautiful. I like the whole state of Ohio from top to bottom, east to west. I've been as far south as Cincinnati, or Cincinnati, if you prefer. And Akron, I think it's still in the top 10, maybe the top 5 of industrial or urban areas. And when I was going to school at Bowling Green, which is kind of like the sister, but not really, they both started out, Bowling Green and Kent State started out as what they called back then normal colleges. And that was for teacher education. This is where you got your bachelor's degree and your teaching certificate, which qualified you to teach K through 12. And then, of course, if you wanted to teach graduate level, master's, MFA, and on and on. But it was primarily a teaching institution. And when I was at Bowling Green back in 75, 76, it was still it was a research too institution. It was a PhD graduate granting institution, but it's primarily to put teachers out there. So you can imagine what Kent State was like back in 1970, when you had a whole generation of young people, right, barely out of their teens. Some of them were teenagers. In fact, Allison Krauss, one of the 4 people that were murdered at Kent State, she was only 19 years old. She was a teenager, beautiful young lady with her whole future in front of her. Okay, these were the future teachers of America. These were the educators. These were the formally trained leaders of their respective communities. And it was quite a statement about what America really is at the bottom, right? And I already expressed my great degree of Gothic pessimism. That's why I'm interested in this whole collegiate Gothic area. I think it comes from the soil. I think it comes, it starts with the Holocaust of Native America and the Holocaust of African slavery, and all the different immigrant groups that were subjected to extreme circumstances, short of slavery and short of genocide, but nonetheless very, very harsh. And no wonder our institutions cannot be relied upon. They've lost legitimacy. Let me put it that way. In the parlance, in the terminology of political science, legitimacy looms quite large. And all these institutions, from where I sit, have lost their legitimacy because they no longer represent the people of the United States of America, right? Sorry to break the news to you, but it's not news. But I'm stating this publicly because I have, at this point, nothing left to lose. Nothing. So anyway, this is Kent State, circa 1970, and there are 3 gentlemen, young men, really, barely out of their teens themselves, who were from that milieu, right? It was a declining major American industrial city, Akron. Maybe their dads and maybe even their mothers worked in the tire factories out there or the auto plants or heavy industry. This was Ohio. This was America, right? It wasn't just Detroit, with Motown and the automobiles. But as George Webb mentioned, Toledo still is the center of Jeep manufacture, right? It's still there. And we're going to bring it back, too. We're going to bring back heavy industry to America. We're going to bring back medium industry. We're going to bring back commerce and Main Street businesses and family-run institutions, family-run businesses back to our local communities. I'm not stopping it short of anything less than that. And this is not just a nostalgia trip. These are all going to be industries of the 21st century, okay? So they're not necessarily smokestack industries, as they're sometimes called, but they will be industries, and they will create near full employment, and they're going to rejuvenate all the communities that surround them. And all you capitalists there, you're right, you Blackstone capitalist investors, people, you arbitrageurs, you Wall Street types, right? Or you're people of the City of London, listen up. This is an investment opportunity for you. You're going to be fabulously wealthy if you subscribe to my vision, and subscriptions is free. So why don't you join the human race and support the American revival, our economic infrastructure revival, and it'll all be cool for now until you get out of line again. Then we're going to come in at you, right? So this is where it all began in Northern Ohio at Kent State. Now, when I was there in 75, 76 BGSU, this is 5 years approximately after the massacre at Kent State. But even then, there was still talk about Kent State because a lot of students had gone over to Bowling Green State University for undergraduate education because it was considered a place where you're not going to get shot by the National Guard. I'm not kidding. So this is a moment in American and world history, really, that's very, very close to me. And I've lived through it. And I got the flashbacks back in 2011. And that's when I determined that I'm going to go in on Chancellor Linda Katehi. And I will tell you, my efforts worked because she was forced to resign. Chancellor Linda P.B. Katehi, the patent holder of all these little micro antenna electronics, which are perfectly suited to the surveillance Bio-Bantustan state, right? That's her. That's why they made her chancellor. She was forced to resign in ignominy before the University of California was ever able to get me out. So you know what? Devo type cultural politics really works. I can attest to that. What do I mean by cultural politics? Did Devo go out there and say, vote, people? Yeah, registered rock the vote, like MTV. Did they say support your local, X, Y, or Z? No, they made music. They made art. They did their own costuming. They did their masks. They said, we are going to use art as a form of political expression. And you know what? Their approach worked. They're still vital today. They're still selling the merch. And believe me, they're going to enjoy a revival, not just amongst we music fans, but amongst the serious cultural critics who are at the dying university, because Devo was that much of an important force in American and international global politics. And I'm so thrilled that I have that Ohio connection with Devo, and also the generational, because they're just a couple years older than me. I have the generational camaraderie with Devo, and I like their music. I like their aesthetic. Their aesthetic comes out of the punk movement in London. Talk about deindustrialization and cities, world-class cities that were being purposely destroyed. It didn't just happen recently, right? With the EU withdrawal, and then the response, the draconian response, and then Mr. Floppy Head Boris, right? Boris the Spider becomes London. Yeah, okay, I'm down with you. And of course, he turned out to be a tyrant. I mean, I could see that one coming from way down, way off there. London was already going down, and there was a punk revolution, and I don't need to go through that. with the Clash and the Sex Pistols, both really good groups. And then later it became a little bit more tamed down. And there was a punk scene in New York. And we all read Rolling Stone magazine before it became a globalist rag, and we all wanted to be part of it, right? But some of us were stuck in Akron, Ohio, or in my case, I was stuck in Anaheim, California. The biggest industry, or one of them was, because it was heavily aerospace and defense related, Orange County. But one of the big attractions of Anaheim, California, Orange County was Disneyland. So I grew up in a phony a virtual reality before that became a thing, right, on the internet. So it became new wave and everything else. You have groups like Blondie and the Talking Heads and other types of groups. A lot of these guys came out of art school. Art schools are hotbeds for politically creative people. And this is why they hit the art school type students with heavy SJW stuff, because they create the iconography, the literature, the memes, the films, and all the other goodies of oppression. But Devo took that and they turned that against the establishment. It's called using the tools of the master against massa, and they did it well, and they're still doing it. So this is where Devo has come from. They were inspired by all these incredible post-counterculture, post-hippie culture that was still very much part of the zeitgeist in the late 60s and through the early 70s, before the great disco scare and its lineal descendant, electronic dance music today, and Dr. Luke and all these other, there's just four on the floor, boom, boom music, I call it, right? So I knew Devo was important. I didn't come across this insight just recently, and I'm not just a fanboy, I hope. But I've been gathering information, books, articles, research, if you will, on Devo for the past few years. I've read it, extensively, and I've been following the careers, the post-Devo careers of the principals, especially Mark Mothersbaugh, right? Incredible mind, creative mind. He later, and I think he still currently does television and film in Los Angeles. And the other founding member, there's three of them, but the third is Bob Lewis, who we don't hear much about. I think he dropped out of the group fairly early on. but the other important founding member was Jerry Casale, or Gerald Victor Casale, who we'll hear from in a moment, right? And of course, as I told you, generationally, when they started hitting the underground radio stations, I think they were at the early stage of MTV. So we're starting to see videos. They're like MTV music video pioneers as well. They're pioneering in many, many different ways that I can't even get to. I'm more interested in their politics today. We can get into their music. I love their music. They were really tight. They were excellent musicians. They remind me of the B-52s, who are also, again, coming out of a college town environment or milieu, right? Because you hang out and you play, that's why you go to college. You go to college so you can listen to music and see it live, drink beer, and watch a lot of films, because this is before Netflix. This is before you could really easily find foreign films or art films. You had to go to a college town in order to do that. And the B-52 is another really incredible, tight group out of Athens, Georgia, I believe it is. Now, I'll call him Jerry. He goes more by Gerald V. Casale today, but back then he was called Jerry Casale. He's still very much active, but he was a member of the Students for Democratic Society. He was a leftist. He was an SDS type. Don't hold that against him, because I think he's, for the most part, not repudiated, but he's moved beyond it. I don't know if he realized that at a certain point, the SDS was infiltrated and was compromised and was taken up, just like the social justice movement, the critical race studies movement today. That was hijacked quite a while ago, and it's now run by NATO and the Pentagon, and all the dumbass professors with the university think that they're doing something so cutting edge and progressive. But by the way, I was one of the early adopters of critical race. I know all of the principals who were writing the key texts that the professors of today are worshiping, right? Michael Omi and Howard Wynot. These are my colleagues, all right? So These names probably don't mean anything to you, but been there, done that. Where you're not really on the mark, you professors out there who are trying to promote so-called critical race theory, find something else. Why don't you promote critical Devo theory? I think you'll have more fun at it, and you'll be making more of a contribution, both intellectually and creatively. You'll be making a very important artistic statement as well. So Jerry Casale, well, before I go into him, I have to show this video, right, to give you, just to take you a little bit back into the place and time, even though I'll be demonetized possibly, because I don't make any money off of this anyway. By the way, will you subscribe? Because I've been at that 6.8 thousand subscriber level for ages. I want you to subscribe just to see if that moves, if it ticks, or am I permanently capped, right? Just for fun, fun and giggles. Okay, enough talking. Let's get into some sounds, ladies and gentlemen.
Soldiers and Nixon's coming, we're finally on our own. This summer I hear the drumming, or dead in Ohio, 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 how many more? Or dead in Ohio, why? Or dead in
Yes, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. So when I see the ass clowns in the comments telling me that I need to read Weird Goings On at Laurel Canyon and Dave McGowan, who I think is a phantom, sort of like Annie Jacobson, they're just these people put out there to put a cap on all the political energy. Find a new hobby, because that is what went down. And this is what is being done when you're hearing these arguments about the 60s being and the counterculture being a purely Tavistock creation. It's a bunch of BS. It was organic. And that's why we're not seeing it here in 2021. The job was done thanks to so-called people who are so indie perceptive, right? Like Dave McGowan, right? Who, by the way, had done previous to that, had done some excellent books. So that's one of the reasons why I think there's a synthetic makeup there of whoever he is. He's a placeholder. It's like the name Benassi, right, or whoever, right? That happens in publishing. Anyway, that's for the people who are the tourists, not for the people in the live chat, because I know you're more sophisticated than that to fall for that garbage. And by the way, Neil Young, welcome. You are now officially an American citizen, and Graham Nash, he is a naturalized U.S. citizen. So Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young they're all Americans now. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about Jerry Casale. He's the person, so far as I can tell, who's maintained his politics, not his SDS formal politics, his leftist politics, his controlled leftist politics, his Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, Kamala Harris party politics, or even the Republican types, right? Donald Trump or whoever you want to put out there, right? I mean, he's repudiated that. His politics is one of personal creative insurgency. Wow, I like that. Creative insurgency. Let's all start a band, people. Let's design our own clothes and our own outfits and start playing out, just like Devo did. They started out as a bunch of art students, said, hey, let's do a band here, and look at where it took them. Okay, I'm going to turn to Casale here, Gerald V. Casale. He was at a public event. This was the 40th year anniversary memorializing the massacre at Kent State University. And he gave a talk to thousands of people that were there. This is 10 years ago now. And by these comments you're seeing, you can see his deep pessimism about the future of American society and the future of politics in the USA. And what the skepticism and the disgust that he's communicating to us is what has transpired. Again, Devo and the people in the group were quite visionary so far as understanding the pulse, the deep, what I call the cultural current, the forensic currents of American culture. So let's begin this one clip with Jerry Casale describing from an eyewitness perspective, this massacre.
And they don't advance, they just stand there. And then the next thing I know, I'm just staring at them as they shoot. And I'm much closer to them than where Jeffrey was or Allison was. And it takes about 3 seconds to realize it was live ammo and everybody's screaming and there's wailing and screaming. And I turn around and that's when I see Allison over my left shoulder. I didn't know it was her yet. That turned out to be her. And then people are screaming, Jeffrey, and I knew Jeffrey, and I looked down, he's face down, and the blood's running down the sidewalk, and it was basically in that time frame of the famous picture with Mary Lou Vecchio. Although I don't remember seeing her when I saw his body and bleeding. I don't think she was in her position yet. The first thing that happened to me when I realized that there were students shot with M1 ammunition, dying or dead, and you're seeing real blood running down the sidewalk, and you're seeing real exit wounds, and it's not Hollywood TV movie violence. I got sick to my stomach, my knees buckled, and I fell down on the grass. That's the first thing that happened to me. I lost it, and I went into slow motion like in a car crash. Like, the sound wasn't real, people weren't moving in real time, everything gets compressed like Raging Bull when Jake LaMotta's getting hit, you know. And I sat there in terror for 2 hours, feeling like I was going to vomit. And myself, along with hundreds of students, then were herded off campus with the help of the teachers who were protest monitors. They had the black armbands on, but the guardsmen had formed basically an exit pass that went down to the corner of whatever that is, Water and South Lincoln, where the old gates were, and marched us double file off campus. And that would be the last time I walked onto campus in 3 months. It became a lockdown crime scene occupied by the National Guard. Until
Okay, let me just flesh out very briefly what I mean by Bio-Bantustan. The Bantustan in South Africa was established in 1951, and this is the clearing out of the Black African population to these, well, they're called concentration camps, but the government called them nations. And then in order to leave that nation and go to work, you had to have an internal passport. Now, we don't have a Bantustan. We're having a Bio-Bantustan. I don't need to elaborate what I'm alluding to. That's America in 221. But you can bet your bottom dollar that it's inspired by the physical three-dimensional Bantustans of the South African apartheid regime of 1951 for the next couple decades. But you know what? That regime fell. That regime ultimately fell both through domestic resistance and also through international pressure. Are they perfect today? Hardly. There's a great deal of political chaos and economic disruption right now going on, but who knows who's behind that as well, right? Anyway, this is all part of the, because, when I was in college as well, undergraduate, the apartheid campaign was also very much in play. So let's move now to Jerry Casale, where he stops being a hippie and then decides to really start rethinking his politics.
Until that point, to that day, certainly I had a high enough IQ to have gotten a scholarship in the honors college, and certainly I knew that in a democracy there was plenty of hypocrisy. But I suppose I was hippie in a sense that I thought that at the heart of it all there was something solid and basically good, and there were always people who didn't respect rights or democracy trying to erode the freedoms we had, but they were just the bad apples. That there was an inherent goodness, So I went from Mr. Peace and Love to no more Mr. Nice Guy pretty quick. I got very, very angry. I mean, had I been wired a little differently, had I not been a really creative person, had I not had an outlet to maybe express it through music or art, I probably would have joined the Weather Underground. That's probably what I would have done. Over my left shoulder.
Casale mentions the Weather Underground, and it turns out that this was a group that was advocating committing violence, which I'm not about, right? But they were advocating committing violence against state institutions. And there was incredible, quote unquote, accidental bombing in a townhouse in Boston. By the way, this is where Bill Ayers Jr. and Bernardine Dohrn, and that's where they earned their stripes. But as it turns out, just like these authors that I'm talking about, right, alluding, and these elected officials and these professors who are synthetic creations, well, it turns out the Weather Underground itself was a synthetic creation. Casale doesn't go into it here, but there was a program that was run by the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover called COINTELPRO. Most of you have heard it. And they went about going from trouble spot in their mind to trouble spot in order to create trouble, in order to justify military police crackdowns. And history is not playing out in the same way because we've been there and done that. But now we have the Bio-Bantustan model of control. Let me see if I can find the section where Casale delves more deeply into his transformation here.
I didn't know it was her yet. Time, everything gets compressed like Raging Bull. And that would be the last time I walked onto campus in 3 months, it became a lockdown crime scene occupied by the National Guard. Until that point, to that day, I had been, I mean, certainly I had a high enough IQ to have gotten a scholarship in the trying to erode the freedoms we had, but they were just the bad apples. Whether underground, that's probably what I would have done. I wanted to kill him. It was upside down. I mean, really. And I mean, certainly one viable or seemingly viable alternative was to seek revenge, get them. Because you realize there is no justice. It's all a big lie. Brute power wins. The media controls the story. You can check the records. Akron Beacon Journal, especially the Record Courier, the Kent paper. Headline that night, May 4th, students shoot guardsmen. Locals thought students had hurt or killed guardsmen and were out to go get students. None of the accounts that came out were even close to accurate. They were all complete propaganda, for the powers that be to spin the students as hardcore political activists, commies, outside agitators hired by SDS, brought in from out of state, just the horror and scare, the fear tactics. So I don't think I would have started the band Devo. I really don't, had it not been for what happened to me that day. And within 2 years, my friends and I had the name Devo, and we had an idea for a band, and it was conceptual. And it was not about nothing. It wasn't about doing drugs and whining about not getting laid or singing a rock song about getting laid. It was serious content, serious issues. Started getting serious about it on a daily basis in 1973 and became my obsession then. And by 1975, we had a working band that could go play live with a body of work. And we were getting laughed at, and we were getting bottles of beer and other things thrown at us, and we were getting hated. But that only made us feel like we were on the right track. Because having had the experience I had of being, I think, on the right side of an issue all the way back, and having that spun as being the bad guy, then it makes it easy to not be some whining little hippie that, oh, they didn't like me, I'm so sensitive, I just want to make art that people like. It's like, no, it's like, look who's hating us, morons. This is good. So it just fueled our resolve. And
it's really interesting how they managed to sneak in their subversive politics, anti-consumerism, anti-military budget, anti-authoritarianism, but they were able to put it in a palatable commercial form. They even, covered the song by the Rolling Stones, Satisfaction, and they put their own little robotic twist on it, but they were always doing with sort of a parodic feel to it. Now I could see that, I can understand it, and I didn't know any of this backstory back then. There was no internet, and Jerry Casale and Mark Mothersbaugh weren't really talking about Kent State or where they really came from. They were marketed as a pop act, as a new wave group. But I could see this, and not, my perceptions have proven to be correct. And I think Devo, there's still a lot more to understand about them. So what I'm suggesting in 2021, that perhaps as an alternative to all these illegitimate institutions who have proven themselves incapable of governance or meting out justice, right, that we can pursue a cultural politics of resistance that will have a corrosive effect on these structures of authoritarian control, right? I've always believed that. I believed that prior to Devo. I believed it when I saw John Lennon leave the Beatles and started to go in an entirely different direction. And I know there are going to be comments saying, "Oh, the Beatles were controlled by Tavistock and John Lennon, blah blah blah, woof woof woof, Yoko Ono, blah blah." Okay, have it your way. But these seemingly innocuous entities, groups, gestures, or books, whether it be V.C. Andrews or whatever, they contain these kernels of resistance that if you nurture them, they're going to have a big effect. And Devo will I think in time be understood as a prophetic voice in the field of the area of popular music, and we really need that right now. Let's continue with Casale. We're running out of time here.
I see the connection. I see the timeline between 1970 and 75 and ultimately 76 when we go out to Los Angeles and start playing in the clubs, in the punk clubs, victimized. Whether it's Bosnia, Sudan, the Holocaust, name it. There's so many Holocausts and horror stories to name on this planet. I mean, the history of this planet is the history of humans being inhumane to other groups of humans, slaughter, killers, murderers. That's history. And sometimes, when they're parts of empires and they win, they seem like heroes in the history books, oddly enough, because guess who wrote them? I mean, look what Australia did to the Aborigines. Look what we did to the American Indians, and it just goes on. And look at Sudan, Darfur. It just goes on and on and on. Pol Pot, in Cambodia. You often feel like the character of Marlon Brando's Kurtz in Apocalypse Now, where he meets up with Dennis Hopper in the cave, and he goes, the horror. It's like you feel numbed and shut down. You realize there is no justice. There really isn't. And there's really no outside reason to be good or take the high road. The only reason to do that is by a personal choice. But if you expect a reward for that, you're really a liberal moron. Because you're just going to invite people to want to kill you. Because evil rules. Each hour.
That's quite a statement by Casale. Evil rules. And I share that sentiment. I share it. I've done enough study and reading and observation to see that there is no nation, no society that is immune from that basic, unfortunate human reality. So the real question becomes is how do we reduce the possibility of these types of regimes implementing their full agenda? I've already given you one suggestion. This is just one of many, but the one suggestion that Devo came up with was parodic performance music art. All right. That's what interests me about it. And it's the same way with other groups, other communities. Let's say working class, rural, Euro-American people in the South, the dispossessed South. They had their music, later called country western music, now called country. And again, that's also gone through a whole phase, a current phase of debasement in Nashville, right? And even Nashville itself has radically changed. But that was a center of a regional culture amongst dispossessed Southerners. And they came up with the music and the art and the literature to go along with it, whether you agree with it or not. I happen to admire and embrace and benefit by the insights of the great Southern artists, whether they be literary or music. And we know about African American music. That's every community has that response to political oppression. Where is it now? It's going to be very difficult, but it is possible. It's going to be difficult because Jimmy Iovine curates everything that goes on iTunes. And all the clubs are locked down because of the Bio-Bantustan system that's been put in place. But where did people of the past, what did they do in order to escape the prohibition for live music and drink and dance and recreating and enjoying each other's company. They went, and well, they call in Britain blind pigs. Here they call them speakeasies or the barrel house. But people found ways to get together, enjoy themselves, make music, exchange ideas, right? And dance with each other, enjoying each other's company, eating food, right? Are we Americans so far down the path that we're not going to find a similar way to develop an underground? Man, it's great. Perhaps it's, this might be the beginning of a cultural renaissance for America, because there's so much creative energy out there that's been bottled up into a Bantustan, and it's about ready to blow. That cork is ready to blow. Right, Corky? Okay, let me continue. I got 5 minutes here. Let's see what Mr. Oh, by the way, I didn't tell you this. I read this in a separate article, but Jerry Casale was on his way to an academic career or something in education, perhaps, and he didn't do bad. He was able to implement his ideas as a creative person by going to Devo. But he was a senior at Kent State when it all went down, but he had already had an offer at the University of Michigan to go to grad school. I think he was a 4-year scholarship student in the honors program at Kent State. So if he was a grad student, he probably got, pretty good package there that would support him through grad school. But because he was the head of the SDS, and because he was on the list, the COINTEL blacklist, his fellowship, his graduate school fellowship was withdrawn. So he didn't get to exercise that option that he had. He gave it up. But what did he do? He didn't cry. He didn't moan. He didn't go into the tank. He started a rock group called Devo. Yes, sirree. So let's take a lesson from that. Anyway, continuing.
I spend here, it means more and more. Being able to talk to all the people I haven't seen, some of which I haven't seen in 40 years, some of which I haven't seen in 30 or 20 years, and they're all here together. And the fact that despite everything I know about how society works, and everything I know about how control of the media spins the importance of any event in history, they haven't been able to kill this. I'm alive right here today, and I couldn't even believe how many people at this point in time, 40 years later, were out in the commons paying any attention whatsoever, that there was any press, that now, luckily, with the internet and with the instant dissemination of that information unfiltered on YouTube, that there is what I've always hoped for and what I tried to emphasize in my speech, which is a whole new audience of 20-year-olds who have to know what happened, and not in some silly way about learning historical details, because that makes it like history class that no kid ever likes. But if you present history in the true way history should be presented, which is, this is just the story of human nature, and it never stops. And people either learn from history or they repeat it. That makes it totally exciting. And that's what I saw the possibility of today. That they get it, that it's an ongoing struggle, just as democracy was an idea 200 and some years ago. And somebody had to fight for it. And then other people come along and try to twist it and use it and tamp it down and declaw it. And if you're not aware of why you're supposed to do this or what the idea was, you can forget the idea.
Okay, let's leave it there as we conclude here. This is what Casale's alluding to. This is like 10 years ago, so he still had hope for the internet. He mentions YouTube in a very positive, even flattering light. And of course, we all know that they revealed their true function quite recently over the past 3 or 4 years, right? They were all part of the plan all along. So Casale's saying that, hey, it's the 20-year-olds, whether they're in Liverpool or Memphis or later on, more recently, Seattle, I'm interested in that scene, There are a group of youngsters out there, men and women both, and some of them are even, like 13, 14-year-old teenagers, right? They're not buying into the hype. They're not they're not having it. We're getting images of conformity and fright and scare, and that's part of the corralling psychology that these masters of behavioral science use on us. But it's the nature of youth to be rebellious, and there's a whole cohort coming up, and they're being put in this pressure cooker, this creative pressure cooker, that I can hardly wait to see them when they start putting their art out there, their music, right? Their sculpture, their graphic art, their comic books, their graphic novels, their podcasts, right? I'm really looking forward to that. So I'm going to leave it on that positive note. Oppression is so difficult, takes so much energy and so much resources to keep it going that eventually, if we hold out long enough, it exhausts itself, right? Without using any sort of violence itself, by just relying on our innate human creativity, our imagination, we can bring down these oppressive structures of control and of power, right? Unmitigated power. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I thank all of you for joining me today. Let's all get ourselves a cup of black tea, Assam tea, and we'll see you in 1 hour with the Thursday trio. And I'm going to ask George Webb about Akron, Ohio, where he's not. I think he's in Toledo right now. I'm going to ask him about that, and I'm going to ask him to join me in a bit of Ohio regional pride, because I think that's where the big change is going to come. I think there's going to be a new Devo. They're practicing right now in the basement at this very moment, I'm sure. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. We'll see you next time. Bye.